We all know that relevant content makes for better learning, but how do we break from the mold of programs built on textbooks that don't understand our individual students?
On this episode of the DIESOL podcast, we're talking with Dr. Brent Jones about how to build your curriculum to simultaneously integrate content and language learning for better, more natural experiences for students.
Welcome to the Diesel podcast, where we focus on developing innovation in English as a second or other language.
I'm Brent Warner, professor of ESL at Irvine Valley College, and of course, I'm here with Esol Reyes, award-winning educator in innovation and professional development, teacher trainer, Edtech focus, all the fun stuff. So, Ishel, how are you?
I'm doing well, Brent. How are you?
Good, good. So today we have our first proper guest since episode 100. Is that right? I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So I am happy to bring on another Brent onto the show. So we've got Brent Jones. So Brent is director of the language programs at Konan University, Hirao School of Management in the area where I am currently on sabbatical. So in the Kansai area. And since 2009, he's helped develop content and language integrated program, which is CLIL. And Brent will get you to break this down for us in a few minutes, but also coordinator of teachers helping teachers, which is a special interest group in the JALT Association, and we did the JALT interview last year
Hmm.
with Claire Kaneko. And Brent's research really focuses, I love this, on L2 learning, motivation and engagement,
Hmm.
instructional technology, instructional design, Clil, curriculum and materials development, genre approaches to second language reading and writing, and extensive reading. And
All
so
the things that we're
eh,
interested
this
in.
is the stuff that we talk about, Brent. So we're so
Yeah.
happy to have you here.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And so welcome to the show. Thank you so much.
Well,
Welcome.
yeah,
Two
thank you
Brents
so
in
much.
one night.
Maybe a little too much, but we'll make it work. So Brent, today particularly, we're really happy to have you on, and I got to know you a little bit. I went to one of the JALT meetings, and then we started talking. And you also do a podcast. We'll be able to share that later as well. Some great, and you had me on to kind of a little bit more open conversations where and it's great. But we can share that a little bit later. But today, I really wanted to get into the work that you're doing on your campus because it's really interesting to me to see. And, I lived in Japan many years ago and I saw a little bit of how the colleges worked and things like that. And now I'm back and I'm still seeing not a lot of changes. But then when I went to your campus, I saw like a very different attitude from the students, a very different approach to what's going on with everything. And I was like, wait a second, it's kind of working over here, right? Like, there's kind of this hidden complaint joke about Japan where it's like, oh, it's just kind of like a false study of English just for I don't know, whatever it is, like posterity's sake or something. But when I went onto your campus and I saw what your students were doing, I'm like, oh, they're really engaged, they're really learning stuff, they're taking these classes, elective classes that can help them out in different types of ways. And so and you said that you're doing this and I think your pronunciation is Clil. We actually don't talk about it very much in my field at my level. And Ishal in pre-show was talking a little bit about how it
In K
is
through
more
12
common in the K-12 programs in the States,
here.
but
Hmm.
Right.
but not as much in the higher ed programs. And so just kind of wanted to get started with what is this CLIL and what is the foundation of it, I guess.
Right. Right. Well, I actually probably started hearing about CLIL, as an actual separate field, maybe a little over 15, maybe even around 15 years ago. But even before that, I was interested in content-based instruction or
Hmm.
content-based language instruction, which was, some people might call it like a fad or a phase that EFL and ESL went through. But it caught my attention very early on. So I was teaching in another business program before, and we were doing more of a content-based instruction and a CBI, especially a thematic type of approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we set up our program, we really thought that, this is something that we want to incorporate. And, my understanding, and there might be some fine differences between CBI and Clil,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think that's important for teachers and even for curriculum developers per se. Just the idea that you're using content as a vehicle and something that's authentic, something that's engaging, something that's relevant to the student's life. With and this comes from educational psychology. The fact that people are going to be more cognitively invested and hopefully emotionally invested in what they're doing, and then that the language acquisition will come in a more natural way. So that's my basic understanding, in a nutshell.
Right. And so, can you tell us a little bit more about the pedagogy behind Khalil and what differentiates it from the, I guess, CBI, which is a content-based instruction, or
Yeah.
why?
So
And how you integrate it too, I
Yeah,
guess.
how you
Yeah.
integrate it.
Because what I get interested in, and Michelle, I think you might be too, is like, are we just talking about the content, or like how is things like grammar and
Mhm.
how are those parts tied in?
yeah, so my understanding about the pedagogy, and I mentioned some of it just now, that
Mhm.
that it's based on something that's relevant and authentic. The language comes up when it's needed. The students, like just in time. The students are going to be able to acquire the language points that they need if it comes in a time when they really need it, and
Mm-hmm.
it'll hopefully stick a little more as well.
I wanted to ask one more question, Brent Jones.
Okay.
So what are some of the, I guess, advantages for students in learning in terms of the content learning and the language acquisition?
Well, if it's and this is another part of it. Actually, this is part of the pedagogy, and I probably brushed over this, but it should be integrated with across the curriculum, not just individual courses, but it should fit in with what they're studying. So we're actually a management school, which is kind of a hybrid between economics and business administration, and with liberal arts as a kind of underlying foundation. But we try to touch on in the English courses, the English curriculum, we try to bring up topics and themes and issues that they will be coming into contact in their other courses. So it's not just once a week, we're gonna talk about European studies. It's hopefully it fits in more with what their other things that they're learning and talking about in their other courses.
So in those cases, then you're kind of going to the other programs or the other departments on campus and saying, what are you guys talking, or at least having a basic understanding of their programs, or
ideally. No,
yeah.
Yeah, and
those are the finger quotes are coming up here, right? So
that's right. I didn't know if I should mention that or not. But yeah, the finger quotes definitely there, and this is definitely an area where we could do a better job. But and I've seen actually presentations about this where a content specialist and a language specialist work together, and it seems ideal, and having a close working relationship, because the language teacher won't always have the content knowledge or the specialization at a level that's needed, for the students. But in most cases, it works out, because it's almost better that the teacher is not an expert, because they can be kind of modeling, how they would learn it as well. And so more of a big problem, and this happens, I think, at university. I'm I'm not going to limit it to Japan. I think this happens a lot, but you have area specialists, and they don't remember what it's like to be a learner
Right.
in that
Mm-hmm.
context.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
there's
The
a
fresh
huge
eyes are
gap.
gone.
Right. So in that sense, sometimes I think, especially for the language program, I don't think it's as big a deal. I think having this teacher learning alongside the learners, I think there's advantages to that, actually.
Okay. So this is interesting. It's super interesting to kind of see what's going on with this. Now, I'm also kind of curious though, because like I said, at your campus, I saw real changes, and we've talked about other campuses where students are kind of like, they see the English teacher and they run away from the teacher because they don't want to have to say hello, right? Or
Right.
something like this. And so I'm wondering what's going on. Like, one is like, are there criticisms of this approach, right, that you're aware of? Or maybe another way to phrase this is, why aren't other programs embracing it, and sticking with the more traditional, like, okay, now it's grammar class time, now it's reading time, whatever else it is. And this is purely from your experience. It's not necessarily a sweeping statement across the lines.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, that's the issue, isn't it? It's one of the reasons that we developed the program the way we did is we felt that frustration. Um, my colleagues and I, who were in on the ground floor of building the program, we had all experienced those courses. And the only reason that there's a grammar class and there's a listening class, from my point of view, is that it's just for convenience. It's easy to box, it's easy to separate, but that's not how language works, right?
Mm-hmm.
Language works, it's much more holistic. And those connections between reading and writing, speaking and listening, they're much more I don't know, say kind of it flows a little bit more naturally, where that's not how the human mind really works. It's like, okay, now it's grammar time, and I'm just gonna learn grammar. So yeah, the criticisms, I think, mainly have to deal with the fact that it is really labor intensive.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. Getting it right is pretty labor intensive. I know there's an educator in Germany who's been using this and has really good. And they're actually, when you look at the curriculum, I just mentioned Germany, and they that's a very good example of a very successful Clil approach. I mean, they integrated even into elementary school, and then they do it through the curriculum, and you can see the success that they have.
That's a great point, because I think a lot of times people come up and they're like, well, why is Germany so able to do, like, why is their English so good, or, Netherlands or whoever it is, right? And it's like, well, they're not treating it as something special and something separate, right? It's just a part of everything. And so when that
That's
approach
exactly,
is there, right, I mean, that is what we're talking about ultimately.
indeed.
So, Brent, you did mention a little bit about the history of your program, but I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit more about how you were able to maybe win over people to Khalil, especially being that it is hard to, I guess, ideally, you would want to have all of your different programs communicating, right?
Right. Yeah, well, I was really lucky. I was asked to come in as a consultant when our department opened. So this goes back to 2007, 2008, and I had already worked with the original dean of the department. He was the dean of a different department before, and I did some intercessions for him. And I'd already been interested in CBI, content-based instruction. And so I was using content in those intercessions. And he sat in on quite a few of the lessons and realized, I believe that he realized how powerful it was with really getting the students involved and engaged, and again, not just cognitively, but, in some cases emotionally, where they would feel such a need to communicate what was ever on their mind, that, the language, of course, sometimes didn't come out as smooth as it could, but they were using the language, actually using it, not just studying it. And so, one of the key phrases that we came up with was studying in English, not studying English. There's a Japanese phrase that we use for that, but and we still use it for when we do recruiting for high schools and things like that. So, and then we try to keep that kind of front of mind as we're talking with students about their language studies. Is, of course you have to study the language, but in the classroom we're going to use it, well, as much as possible, use the language. And then if you have some trouble areas, or if there's things that you think you need to shore up or spend more focus on, then that's what you can do outside of class.
And so what has been the students' response to this approach? I mean, because I can imagine it's intimidating, right?
Yeah. And we do get some pushback, because it's, the students are so used to a certain kind of learning in Japan. And so when they see the teacher turning over a lot of the decision making and turning over a lot of the management things to the students, sometimes we do get pushback. It's like, oh, what are you doing? Are you really a teacher?
Yeah.
But I think, and this may be another part of the challenge, I think, that I didn't mention earlier, is it's maybe not as effective for lower level students. I think lower level students maybe need another layer or a couple of layers of scaffolding or support, or something to shore up the language a little bit more. And I think we've found that in our program. The students who leave the program, and again, I haven't talked really about our program, but we have 3 semesters of required courses. So 3 15-week semesters. And students are basically, they have at least one 90-minute class a week, or sorry, a day, one English class a day for the first 3 semesters. And then they can take the electives that you talked about earlier. And also we have projects. One of the underlying components of our entire program is problem-based learning, project-based learning. So that PBL. The other PBL. And I can talk more about that later.
Well, I would definitely like to, Brent, because, well, a couple things, just coming back to that cycle of saying, hey, getting the pushback from the students. I've gotten that too, because in my classes are a little bit more, they're different than what students are used to, even in a program like ours in the States. And so they're like, wait a second. And I actually had a student complain about me because I gave her and all the students the freedom of deciding when they're turning in their papers, and she she said that without a hard deadline, it made her like delay or whatever. So it was a very interesting thing. But so I think you're going to see that, right? You're going to see this kind of, hey, this is what I've been used to, and I don't understand that actually like learning runs in different ways than the ways that schools have been traditionally built to process people through it. And so I think that's something, just if people are interested in building this type of program or kind of building these kind of ideas, it's something just to be aware of. But I did want to get into some of the specific examples, because I came into your class a little bit, and I observed a bit of your some of your students interacting, and it was great, really, really awesome, because you were doing I think it's the whole class on the beer industry in Japan. Is that right?
That's right.
So I know you've got a few of these different ones, but can you explain a little bit about what goes on and like how you make decisions on that content that makes value for the students?
Yeah, I think with the projects, and this probably is also on the Japanese side as well, but it starts with the teacher's interest. It's got to be something that the teacher feels really comfortable with, and excited about. Not to say that it should be their main area of specialty, which I think it shouldn't be. I think the projects should be something where the teacher still has something to learn as well. And again, this part of that is that gap that I was talking about earlier. But I think that's where it starts, is something that the teacher's excited about. Then, of course, something that the students would be either interested in, or it would be relevant for their careers. A lot of, especially our second and third years, they're really ramping up and stressing about their careers, what they're going to do. And so looking for ideas that are not so specific that they're going to be limited in the impact that they have, but and broad enough that the students are going to go away with something that they can use right away, or they see the relevance and they want to make that part of their toolbox.
I love it. So we said the beer, and could you walk us through just a little bit of that as an example? Because I think it stands out to me as unusual, but also like really like, oh, this is cool, because I could see why students, college age students would want to study this too.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things is, and alcohol, anything to do with alcohol. So, within the last 15 or 20 years, the craft beer boom has kind of taken place. And in Japan wide, I mean, of course, worldwide, it's been popular even longer. But the idea that, and the funny thing is, a lot of the students coming into that class, that project class, are not really interested in beer per se. They don't particularly like beer. But they come in and, it's something like, oh, I'd like to know more about beer as the industry, at the macro level. But also then, we're a school of management. So looking at it from the manager's point of view. So with that course, when I was developing it, I was trying to think about, what do students really need to know to get a picture of the industry? And so we do it in modules. We have 3 5-week modules, and the first module is basically about the American beer industry, partially because it has a short enough history that it's not, you're not ranging over millennia, but also the impact that it had on the beer industry worldwide. So we spend 5 weeks on talking about that, and then the second 5 weeks we actually look at a case study about Asahi Super Dry in Japan, and Asahi Super Dry basically changed the whole beer market in Japan. But there was a case study written, so that case study takes up the middle, and that leads into the last module, which is the craft beer industry, craft beer market in Japan, and especially in Kansai. And in groups of students, they choose one local brewer, do the research on them, and then contact them for an interview, go and do an interview, take some pictures, and then write up an article about them in Japanese and in English. I want them to do both for that. So
it's not fascinating.
It's like, yeah, well, you get into it, you're like, oh, there's so many, like, because you can see how the students just like, there's so many parts to the conversation, but it all ties in with the business, like the needs and everything.
And
it keeps the teacher busy. I really on my toes in that class. First of all, keeping an eye open on what's happening and what's relevant, but also within each group, the groups are working together throughout the course, and realizing which individuals need more support and how to get, how to provide support directly, but also how to provide support through the other students. Because actually that becomes even more powerful, that near peer role modeling is super powerful in those contexts.
That is so cool. So it sounds like I know Brent had been talking about you since he heard about the course, and I was when he first said he does this thing with beer and English, and I was thinking, oh, they go out and drink at a bar.
No, at the end, I actually try to at least get some of the students to actually visit breweries and look at, we talk about the brewing process, we talk about all of that through the course, but I really want to get them out of the classroom. And sadly, not as many of them as I'd like I've gotten them actually into the brew house to see how it's done. But a few do. And I get a few students actually who, by the end of the course, they are excited about beer. Not just drinking, for fun, but
the whole. That's very cool.
And it's cool, and that's just one example, right? That's one class that cycles through, right? So there's different topics and all sorts of things. It's just like, what a cool program to have.
Yeah, and I'll just throw out a few of the other courses. The ones that I'm doing one on documentary filmmaking from April, so that's on my mind right now, and I think this is the third time I've done it. I don't do any of the projects back to back. What I mean is I try to take a year off, and that's to keep me fresh. And also it allows, if students are interested in taking my other projects, they can. So they can't take the same project, of course. So it gives, I get to meet more students that way, and it kind of keeps me fresh as well. So documentary filmmaking, I'm doing oral histories project in the fall, which this will probably be the 5th or even 6th time that I've done that one. Roger does one on Pechakuchanite, which it's also part of our program. We've been hosting Pechakuchanites for 15 years now. Our number 59 is coming up next month.
Wow, so, cool.
I participated in that on the
he's one of our guest speakers. Yeah.
Very, very cool. So, Brent, if people are thinking about Clil teachers or programs, if anyone's listening out there from a program that can help their teachers get started, where would they look? What would you ask them to? Where do you think that they should get started?
Yeah, I think just reading up as much on looking at case studies. I'm a big fan of case studies. So looking at published reports on programs that are reporting, because often those will also address the challenges and the problems that they have. So looking at as many cases as possible. Yeah, I think I'll talk about the challenges that we've had, and that maybe will give some hints at what teachers should be on the lookout for. The big one, one big one is that if teachers are not really trained in Clil or CBI, then the focus kind of tends to drift more toward the content over the language, and we don't want that as well, because that at our core, we're they're English courses. They're there to develop the target language skills, and so keeping that balance in mind, that's been one of our big challenges. We have to constantly remind the teachers. We have a lot of part-time teachers in our program, and so again, they're running around, they might be at 5 different universities in the week. They're coming in, and all the other universities, it's, pick up the textbook, let's go to page 76, let's do these drills. And so, making sure that they understand what we're trying to do. So we actually write all the lesson plans. We try to leave it as flexible as possible. Meaning that we don't want to take away the teacher's independence. The teacher, they're professionals, and they're going to have their own twist on teaching things. But we have a kind of core curriculum made for them, and also the materials. We develop our own materials. We only actually we cut out 2 textbooks this semester, so I think we're down to just one course that uses a textbook. Everything else is materials that are based, prepared by us. Yeah, so those are the big challenges, and keeping and reminding students as well that they are making progress with the language. So sometimes they lose sight of that as well. Like, oh yeah, I'm learning a lot about American studies, or I'm learning a lot about discussion and debate, but my English is not getting better.
Right.
Actually, it is getting better. You just don't, you don't recognize it. So reminding students that you are developing, you are making progress. And luckily we have in our program too, they take a test called the GTech, and then at the end of their first semester and the end of the third semester they take the TOEIC test, which is another Japan-based. But we have the 2 tests which they take a year apart, and so we can show the students, and we can show administrators, they are making progress.
Right.
And we have other departments in the university to compare to, and our program always comes out on top.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, this is great. There's so much to think about. And so I think one of the things that might be inspiring for people listening is like, oh, so many teachers kind of get into this, like, oh, I'm doing the cycle of the classes that I always teach, and maybe it's not that fresh for me or whatever else it is, right? And so I love the idea of like how engaging it is for teachers as well, right? And it's like, it's not just like, okay, I'm doing this stuff all for the students. It's like, no, I get to make something out of these courses that sparks some joy and excitement in me as a teacher as well, and keeps me thinking about fresh ideas and all that. So I like how those are all possibilities with this, and then it allows you to pursue interests through your work at the same time. So what a great setup to have.
It's so key, and I think the teachers will find that it's refreshing. It's so refreshing that to have something that they're excited about. And yeah,
absolutely.
Very cool.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this, Brent. I think it's just fascinating stuff, and there's so much cool stuff to explore that maybe a lot of our listeners haven't totally been exposed to this side of thing, right? Even though content-based teaching or these are ideas that of course have been out there, but I love the idea of like really kind of digging in and building it in the kind of in the nerves of the program.
And
that's
if you have been using Clil and you are listening and we just don't know about you, let us know. We'd love to see how others are implementing this method. All right, it is time for our fun finds. And this time around, I have, I don't own any records. Brent, you do, right?
I do, yeah.
But I found that I found a mesh record holder, like it's like a display case, but it's just the right size to keep in my classroom and fill it with books. It's movable, it's portable, and it's pretty affordable. And so I had been looking for something that I could have in my classroom to expose my students to books. And since we don't have furniture in our classrooms, that was the perfect thing. So it's just just looked up record holder, and it fits just enough, and I can put it away when I need to.
Nice. Actually, I love that idea of displaying the books that you're reading or that you're working on for your students. It's kind of like this reminder for them, like, oh, there's more, people are doing this stuff or whatever it is. So that's great. So mine, I'm taking it back to an old video game from the 90s. It's called Myst, and it's been re-released on many platforms over the years. And so I just downloaded it. I found it that it's it was on discount or something for the Mac, and so I was like, you know what? I haven't played this since I was a teenager. I want to give it a try. And so Myst, MYST, is a very classic kind kind of discovery first person video game where you just kind of move around this island and try and figure out whatever else going on. But check it out if you're interested in a classic game. Brent, do you have a fun find?
Yeah, well, I want to mention about Myst. I remember that was one of the first kind of role play or simulation type games that I played, and yeah, I'm happy to hear that it's still making some headway. Yeah. So one thing that I'd like to introduce, and I don't know about your listeners, they may have heard about this already, but it's X Reading, and it's basically a learning management system. And he has connections with a lot of the major publishers. So they have a huge amount of titles. And also there's tests for each of the graded readers. But, students have their smartphones with them all the time. And they, some of them have a lot of train time. And so being able to read a graded reader on the way home, we like it. Yeah, X Reading.
X Reading.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks so much for listening to the show. You can check out our YouTube channel, and we have a video on there that Esol made about generating AI images for the classroom. And so if you haven't gone and checked that out, it's a great video with some great advice. So thanks, Esol, for making that. And it does tie in with our last episode, which was on AI image generation for language development. And so that was on episode 102. Go check it out if you have a chance. Out there in the world, on the socials, you can find me at Brent G. Warner.
You can find me at ixy_pixie. That's IXY_PIXY.
And Brent, where can people? Oh, you also do a podcast, right? So we want to make sure people hear about that. But where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn. I do have an Instagram account, but I don't post a lot. Yeah, and the podcast is wordhunters.com, and I'm glad to
listen to that.
I haven't
to the Word Hunters.
I'm really happy to have the chance to reciprocate for Brent. Brent was on our show, and the purpose of that podcast is more about people sharing their stories, just people talking about their experiences. Yeah, hope people can tune in.
Yeah, it's great. And I also love how it ties in with your oral histories as well when you get into the content-based learning or the Clil setup too.
That's right.
Thanks so much, everybody, for listening to the show. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Bye.